What if it didn't just fight back, but judged you? A crew of explorers lands on the galaxy's most dangerous world, where even the air watches, and the ground decides if you live or die. But what they find isn't just danger. It's an ancient intelligence waiting for one species brave or foolish enough to understand it. If you're new here, make sure to subscribe to the channel and show a thumbs up by liking the video. Now, let's dive into this wonderfully thrilling story you won't forget. The rain on Earth hadn't stopped for 3 days when Captain Nolan Graves got the call. Not that it mattered. He wasn't the kind to wait for clear skies. Sitting in the corner of a quiet orbital bar, sipping recycled coffee, Nolan raised a brow as the encrypted message lit up on his wristband. The Galactic Assembly had summoned him. That usually meant one of two things. They were either desperate or out of options. Sometimes both. Nolan arrived at the orbital station with his usual charm, a crooked grin and zero respect for formality. He was met by Counselor Riven, a pale, nervous man who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. "We need your crew. For a special mission," Riven said without any of the usual pleasantries. "Classified, high risk, no guarantees." Nolan leaned back in the metal chair across from him. "You had me at no guarantees." The counselor didn't smile. "You've heard of Cadra 9? Nolan had. Everyone had. It was the kind of place told around campfires and whispered in flight academies. A planet with an ecosystem so hostile, so aggressive, it was labeled as a living weapon. Most who visited never returned. Those who did, didn't return whole. "Yes," Nolan said. "The Death Planet." Riven nodded. "We received a signal from its surface, not a distress call, something older, complex. It's broadcasting, through frequencies no one uses anymore. We think it's a form of artificial intelligence, possibly alien in origin. We want you to investigate." "Let me guess," Nolan replied, his tone dry. "You tried sending drones. They didn't come back. You tried sending soldiers. They didn't either, so now you're sending us." Riven hesitated. "We need people who think differently, who adapt fast, who don't follow the usual rules." That, at least, was true. Nolan's team was famous, or infamous depending on who you asked, for walking into impossible missions and somehow walking back out. He looked down at the file, flicked through it. Scans of the planet, unreadable data, a final line that simply read, "Possibility of contact, unknown." He agreed before finishing the coffee. By the next morning, the crew had gathered in Hangar 17. Dr. Lise Rain, a brilliant biologist who once mapped the nervous system of a jellyfish-shaped alien that communicated through scent. She didn't say much, but when she did, people listened. Then there was Tamsin Vex, the team's tactical lead who could turn a toothbrush into a weapon and looked like she hadn't smiled since the age of 10. Oren Vale, their engineer, arrived last, lugging his toolkit and speaking only to the ship, which he addressed like an old friend. And of course Nolan, captain, gambler, and the only one reckless enough to say yes to Cadra 9. Their ship, the Warden's Gamble, wasn't built for luxury. It had been retrofitted with extra shielding, reactive armor, and a medical bay that looked more like a survival bunker. There were no escape pods, just one mission: reach the planet, locate the signal, survive. As they left orbit, the crew gathered in the main cabin. Nolan stood at the front, watching the stars blur past. "Cadra 9 is not just another Deathworld," he told them. "It's something else, and it's calling us. Calling us like a dinner bell," Tamsin muttered. Liz tapped her tablet, already pulling up climate data and biological scans. "If the planet's ecosystem really is intelligent, then it's more than a threat. It might be trying to communicate." Oren didn't look up. "Or it just wants to see what we taste like." The ship shuddered as it jumped into approach vector. The image of Cadra 9 filled the screen. Deep green clouds that glowed with lightning, oceans that churned like living things, land masses scarred with massive symmetrical patterns. "Looks friendly," Nolan said. "Reminds me of my last breakup." As in, they entered the upper atmosphere. The planet responded immediately. Electrical storms crackled around them, throwing off their sensors. Something large and winged flew past the ship, too fast to identify. The controls bucked under Nolan's. Hands and alarms screamed through the cockpit. "Brace yourselves," he called out. "We're going in hard." Tamsin strapped in with practiced calm, flipping switches. "Weapons are ready. I'm reading multiple life forms converging." "Are they attacking?" Nolan asked. "No," she said slowly. "Not yet. They're watching." The warden's gamble crashed into the surface with a bone-rattling thud. Not a perfect landing, but not a fatal one either. Smoke hissed from the panels and the ship's lights flickered. Nolan unstrapped himself, looked around at his crew. Everyone was alive. Barely. Outside, the land was still. No creatures attacked. No plants moved. But every inch of Kydra 9 seemed to pulse with silent, patient attention. Nolan stepped toward the airlock, hand resting on his sidearm. "All right," he said, more to the planet than his team. "Let's see what you want." Behind him, Liz pulled on her field helmet. "Or what you need." The door hissed open. The air outside was thick and warm, like walking into a dream with teeth. And from deep within the forest, something old began to stir. The first step onto Kydra 9 didn't feel like a step at all. It felt like crossing into another world, one that was aware. The ground was strangely soft, not like soil, but more like sponge, pulsing faintly beneath their boots. Captain Nolan Graves was the first to exit the ship, eyes scanning the dense alien forest in front of them. The trees were impossibly tall, their bark glowing faintly in patterns that seemed to move. Leaves shimmered with colors Nolan had no name for. Everything was too still, too quiet, like a breath being held. Behind him, Dr. Lise Rain adjusted her scanner, brows furrowed. "The atmosphere is rich in oxygen, but something's odd," she said. "It's changing, like it's reacting to us." Tamsin Vex stepped out next, her rifle at the ready. "Feels like we're being watched." "We are," Oren Vale muttered, eyes not on the trees but on the strange readings scrolling across his device. "There are energy pulses coming from the forest. Not random, rhythmic, almost curious." They moved slowly, staying close to the ship at first. No birds, no bugs, no wind, but they all felt it, that buzzing sensation just behind their eyes. Not a sound, but a pressure. Something unseen paying very close attention. Nolan didn't say anything at first. He was watching the shadows, listening for movement. He didn't know what he was expecting, but he knew this wasn't a normal mission. Kydra 9 wasn't just alive, it was listening. About 50 meters from the ship, the terrain opened into a wide, flat area filled with crystal formations that hummed like tuning forks. They gave off no heat, but radiated something else. Liz ran, her scanner over one of them, and stepped back sharply. "It's not just crystal, it's biological. This isn't a rock, it's a living system." Oren crouched down near a low, glowing vine. It recoiled the moment he reached toward it. "These plants have nervous systems," he said. "They're not just reacting to touch, they're anticipating it." Tamsin stayed at the rear, watching their path. She didn't like this. She never liked missions with no clear enemy, but she wasn't about to admit that out loud. "We're being tracked," she said, voice low. "I count at least a dozen different life forms moving in the trees, not attacking, just circling." "They're observing us," Nolan said, "like scientists watching lab mice." Liz stopped walking, or judges watching contestants. They continued moving toward a signal source deep within the forest, following the pulse of strange energy that seemed to guide them rather than block them. As they walked, the forest changed. The trees gave way to larger, stranger growths, tall, spine-like towers covered in bioluminescent patches. The ground hardened. The colors around them shifted. It was almost beautiful in a terrifying way. Suddenly the forest opened, and before them stood a vast structure, half-grown, half-built. Giant arches of crystal reached into the sky, pulsing slowly like a heartbeat. At the center was a platform covered in symbols none of them recognized. Nolan stepped forward, his voice quiet. "This is the source of the signal." "It's responding to us," Lise whispered. The crystals were changing color as they approached, glowing brighter in a soft ripple. It's communicating. Oren checked his device again. It's not random, this is structured data. This thing is broadcasting in patterns. It's not just alive, it's intelligent. As they approached the platform, the feeling of being watched became overwhelming. It was no longer subtle. It was direct, personal. Each of them felt it. Questions brushing against their minds, curiosity wrapping around their thoughts. Nolan stopped at the edge of the platform. It knows who we are. Tamsin raised her weapon slightly, unsure whether to be afraid or amazed. Or it's trying to decide what to do with us. The moment Nolan stepped onto the platform, a pulse of light raced through the structure. The ground trembled slightly, not violently, just enough to make the message clear. It had noticed. Then the crystals began to hum, a low, musical tone that wasn't quite a sound but more a vibration that passed through their bones. Words didn't form in the air. They formed inside their minds. "Welcome," said the voice that wasn't a voice. "We see you." Lise staggered back, stunned. "Did anyone else?" "We all heard it," Nolan said. He didn't look afraid. He looked interested. "We have been watching," the presence continued. "You are different from the others. You came not with fear but with wonder." Oren's face lit up in awe. "It's not speaking English. It's using ideas, emotions. It's translating itself into our minds." "You passed the first test," the voice said. "You reached the center. You were not hunted. You were studied." Tamsin looked around. The forest had gone still again, but not silent. There was a rhythm to it now. A breath. A waiting. "What happens now?" she asked. There was a long pause. Then the voice returned. "We will show you what we are." And with that, the crystals brightened and the ground beneath their feet opened, not into a pit but into a tunnel of light. Not threatening, not hostile, just an invitation. Nolan looked at his team. They didn't speak. They didn't need to. This was what they had come for. Without hesitation, they stepped into the light one by one, and the planet watched. The tunnel of light did not feel like a tunnel at all. It wasn't cold or dark, and it didn't even seem physical in the usual way. It was like stepping through a thought, bright, endless, and quiet. Captain Nolan Graves felt as though time had slowed down. He could still see his crew ahead of him, walking through the same strange passage, but they moved like shadows, inside a memory. Then, without warning, it ended. They stepped into a chamber so large it made Nolan feel small for the first time in years. The walls glowed softly, made of crystal so smooth and clear that reflections danced in every direction. The air was still, but heavy with energy, as if the room itself had a pulse. In the center stood a single structure, a tall, jagged pillar, wrapped in spiraling veins of light. It hummed quietly, not loud enough to hear but loud enough to feel. Dr. Lise Rain moved toward it slowly, scanning it with her tablet. Her hands were shaking. "It's alive," she whispered. "This whole structure is alive, and it's remembering." Oren Vale approached the pillar and placed a hand on its surface. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the light under his palm began to shift, changing colors in smooth waves. Symbols appeared, floating in the air, spinning slowly. "It's communicating again," he said, eyes wide. "I don't know how, but I think it's reading our minds and translating its memories into a form we can understand." The room began to change. The walls darkened, and light filled the space with moving shapes. The crew turned in silence, as images formed in the air. Vast civilizations, unfamiliar worlds, and towering beings made of both flesh and light. They watched these beings build structures, raise starships, and shape entire planets. But always beside them was something else, an energy, a presence, a living planet, just like Kadra 9. Lise stepped back, almost overwhelmed. "They created it," she said. "This place, this planet, They didn't conquer it. They partnered with it. Nolan watched, arms crossed, trying to piece it together. They grew their technology, he said slowly. Like farming. They didn't build machines. They taught the planet how to help them. The vision changed again. The creators were now gone, disappeared into the stars or perhaps something even further beyond. But Cadron 9 remained awake and waiting. Centuries passed, then millennia. Other species came trying to claim the resources. None of them survived. Not because the planet was evil, because they didn't understand. They attacked. They took. And Cadron 9 defended itself. Tamsin Vex stepped forward, watching the final vision fade into mist. It's a test, she said. This whole world is a test, not just survival. Understanding. Patience. Suddenly the voice returned, smooth and calm inside their minds. You understand now, it said. We were built with a purpose, to watch, to wait, to guide. Guide who? Nolan asked out loud, his voice echoing through the glowing chamber. Those who see beyond threat, those who ask instead of take, those who listen. We're not the first, are we? Orin asked, looking around the room. You are not, the voice answered. But you are the first to reach this place with curiosity instead of conquest. Hlyce looked at the pillar again. What do you want from us? There was a pause, not empty but full of thought. Then the voice returned. We wish to share, to connect, to offer what we are to those who are ready. Nolan narrowed his eyes. Connect how? Our systems, our knowledge, our memory. You are limited by your years and your bodies. We offer something more. Not control, not dominance. Partnership. The pillar in the center of the room pulsed brighter. The images returned, this time of humans and the planet working together. Building, teaching, growing something entirely new. Lifespans extended, thoughts shared, galaxies explored. Tamsin crossed her arms, skeptical. And if we say no, then we thank you for reaching this far. You may leave. We will wait for others. Orin looked at Nolan, then at Lise. It's not a trap, he said softly. It's a door. We choose whether or not to walk through. The room went quiet. For a long moment, no one spoke. Then Nolan took a slow breath. Why us? He asked. Why humans? Because you risk for knowledge, you joke in danger. You adapt faster than you break, you see the impossible and ask, what if? Lise turned to Nolan. This isn't about survival anymore, she said. It's about purpose. Nolan looked at his team. They were tired, amazed, frightened, but also alive in a way he hadn't seen in years. He saw the spark in their eyes. The need to understand. To try. Then show us, he said. We're ready to listen. And the chamber responded. The lights grew warmer. The pillar shifted, growing taller. Energy swirled around them, not threatening but welcoming. They had made it this far. And the planet had decided to speak. But what it said next would change everything. The chamber pulsed with light, soft and warm, like a sunrise after a long, dark night. For a moment, the crew simply stood in silence. Each one of them felt it, something, deep, ancient, and aware, brushing against their thoughts like a breeze against skin. It wasn't just a voice anymore. It was a presence, clear and close. The planet wasn't just alive. It was awake. And it was waiting for an answer. Captain Nolan Graves took a slow breath, letting the quiet settle. His crew was gathered around, the central pillar, watching as its spiraling veins of light danced in sync with their heartbeats. There was no threat in the room, no weapons aimed at them, no traps hidden beneath their feet. Just an offer. A choice. Tamsin Vex stood stiffly, beside him, arms crossed, her eyes narrow. You realize what it's asking, right? She said. This isn't just a partnership, it's a transformation. We wouldn't be the same people on the other side. I know, Nolan replied. But maybe that's the point. Dr. Lys. Rain took a step closer to the glowing pillar. She looked different now, calmer. The usual guarded look in her eyes had softened. It's not trying to change us, she said quietly. It's asking if we're ready to grow beyond what we were. Oren Vale, still kneeling near one of the data crystals, added, It's offering more than knowledge. It's offering time, connection, a future that isn't built on fear and competition but learning. Cooperation. The voice returned then, clear and thoughtful. You have seen a small part of what we are. You now understand why we exist. We do not take. We guide. We do not command. We listen. If you choose this path, you will help shape the future of more than just your world. Tamsin paced slowly, hands on her hips. And if we say no, then we will wait, the voice replied. There is no punishment, no consequence. You are already part of our memory that cannot be undone. Nolan turned to face his team. We're the first to be given this choice, he said. We're not soldiers here. We're explorers. If we agree to this, we won't just be helping the planet. We'll be helping other species, other worlds, becoming something more. We'd live longer, Oren added. Think bigger. See things we can't even imagine now. We'd lose something too, Tamsin said. We might not even be human in the way we think of it. We'd be better, Lise said softly. Not less. Just more. Nolan let the conversation hang in the air a moment longer. This wasn't a decision he could make alone, and he didn't want to. We vote, he said. One by one. Oren spoke first. I say yes. Lys nodded. Yes. Tamsin was quiet. Then she sighed, looking around the chamber. You know what? Fine. Yes. But I still don't trust anything that glows this much. All eyes turned to Nolan. He smiled a little, then looked up toward the ceiling where light shimmered like the sky. It's a yes from me, too. The chamber reacted instantly. The walls lit up in slow, swirling waves, as though the planet itself was breathing a sigh of relief. The light from the central pillar flowed outward, wrapping around the crew, in soft strands that felt warm and familiar. There was no pain, no sudden transformation, just peace. A quiet expansion, like a door opening inside their minds. They saw images, possible futures where they guided young civilizations away from war, helped planets heal from damage, and planted seeds of understanding across the stars. They felt their minds stretch, not losing who they were, but adding to it. Their thoughts began to move faster, clearer. Time seemed to slow around them, not as a trick, but because they had stepped outside of it in some small way. Then the room faded. When they opened their eyes again, they were still in the chamber. But it had changed. It was brighter now, alive in a different way. They looked at each other and knew. They were still themselves, but they were more. They had touched something greater, and it had touched them back. A voice, new but familiar, echoed in the chamber. It was Nolan's voice. We have accepted the invitation. We are ready. Years passed, though to Nolan and his team, time no longer felt the same. They became guides, not rulers. Teachers, not commanders. Other species came to Cadra 9, drawn by the same signal, the same questions. Some stayed, others left. But none were forgotten. And then, far above the surface of the living world, a new ship appeared. Nervous, cautious, curious. Inside were explorers, brave and uncertain. As they entered orbit, their instruments began to flicker. The planet was responding. As they approached the surface, a calm voice reached into their minds. Not threatening, not strange. Welcome, travelers, it said gently. We've been waiting.